In this episode, we revisit the Bofors scandal from the 1980s in light of a new book and a new development in the matter. We also discuss the fact-shaming controversy involving the Congress national spokesperson Shama Mohammed. But first, we talk about the Indian stock market. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Over the past few weeks, the Indian stock market has been experiencing a sharp and continuous slide.
Today, Indian stocks took a dive. Everything was in the red. Leading names in the banking sector, telecom, oil and gas, even metal stocks fell.
Stock market investors in India lost over 9 lakh crore rupees in just one day. It was the worst day for the markets in around 5 months.
Everyone's wondering, ab kya hoga mere portfolio ka? Where do things go next? So let me start.
Last week, both the Nifty 50 and the BSE Sensex were down by 16%, compared to the record highs that they had experienced in September last year. According to Reuters, all the 13 major sectors had logged in losses, and the broader small and mid caps fell by 1% each. And while the market has seen a small rise in the past 2 days, investors are still a bit nervous. So to discuss the reasons behind the slide and what investors should keep in mind, the Indian Express's managing editor, P. Vaidynathan Iyer, joins us. Vaidhy, begin by giving us a sense of just how significant this fall has been.
So, if you look at just since September, September 26th, I remember was the peak in the stock markets when we touched almost 85,000, 86,000, the Sensex, and now we are something like almost 16% down. So the fall has been sharp. And for people who are new to the markets, it looks as if the heavens have fallen. So it is very scary for them. Look at all the people who invested in the stock markets just in the last 5 months. They have suddenly seen such a sharp erosion in their value, in their net worth, that, they can be scarred for the rest of their lives, whether they should come back to the markets and invest, whether it is a safe proposition. Just when you thought that markets will give returns forever, and returns which are 20% and 30%, which many people witnessed, even on a month-on-month basis, they saw annualized yield going up to almost 20-24%. So that really shocks you. So it has been sharp and it has been scarring for many.
And what do we assess are the possible reasons behind this downslide?
See, I think there are, 3 reasons, if I can just, very quickly go through them and in a very crisp manner. One would be the earnings of Indian companies have been below expectations. The earnings have been low for, many quarters. And this quarter, if you look at all sectors which are not banking, finance and insurance, those sectors, the net profits of all listed companies have been marginally up by about 5%. And the revenues are up by about just 7%. So these are not really enthusiastic numbers. So there was this whole sense in the markets that Indian companies are overvalued. Particularly the stock prices are huge across sectors, at least all non-financial sector markets. So that's where you have seen the biggest drops also. So if you look at the financial sector stocks, be it a Bajaj Finance, in fact, I just discovered that amongst the top 30 companies in the Sensex, it is only Bajaj Finance which is giving positive returns. All of them are in red. Or the stocks which have fallen the least could be an ICICI Bank, could be an HDFC Bank. So these are the stocks which have fallen the least. All other sectors have fallen deep, fallen very sharply.
Right, and could you talk about this point a bit more, from the investor's point of view? What is the reason that corporate earnings are an important metric for them?
So, corporate results give you a sense whether the economy is doing well or it is not doing very well. So whenever corporate sales go up, turnover of companies go up, or their profits go up, it gives you a sense that they are selling more. So that there is demand for goods and services.
Yeah, and higher turnovers also give you a sense that people have purchasing power, that consumption is up.
Absolutely. A sharp increase in turnover gives you a sense that there is more demand for goods and services. So it can be biscuits, it can be, software, it can be telecom, you're speaking more, etc., etc. So across sectors, you get a sense that there is more demand. More demand means the market is growing. People are consuming more, and that is growth. So that translates into higher output for the economy and means that the Indian economy is growing well. But the other thing that is slightly different in how profits work. So in India, what has been happening is profit growth has been good for many companies despite the volumes being more or less stagnant. So what that means is companies are probably tightening their belts. They're cutting costs. So the cutting costs could be even in terms of salaries or no increase in salaries when inflation is rising. So this is the difference. Turnover means more demand, more growth. Higher profit doesn't necessarily mean more demand, more growth.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you're selling more things. It could just mean that you're cost cutting.
Absolutely. So that's what happened in the last 3-4 years. So their interest burden came down. They did not increase salaries. Probably input prices came down a bit. All that helped them rein in their costs and increase profits without commensurate increase in, say, turnover.
Okay, so one reason you're saying is that investors have now figured out that corporate earnings, their turnovers are not great. So that's one reason that they're pulling out. What are the other two reasons?
There is global uncertainty, right? If you see since Donald Trump's presidency, day after day, market is just bracing for something which is a statement from the US, which is still the biggest player in the global economy, kind of roiling the markets. Tariffs is the newest weapon, or it has been weaponized by Trump to kind of what he thinks is extracting a fair deal from all countries, right? So, say a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum on Indian imports from India, or saying that I will put reciprocal tariff. Like, if you are going to put a levy of 40% on what I sell to you in the agricultural sector, then I'll put 40% on what you sell to me in the agricultural sector. So that kind of completely upends the global free trade or the WTO rules-based order that we have been witness to for a very long time.
April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in, and whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth. Whatever they tax us, we will tax them. If they do non-monetary tariffs to keep us out of their market, then we will do non-monetary barriers to keep them out of our market. There's a lot of that too. They don't even allow us in their market.
So this uncertainty, it has put the global trade itself in jeopardy. So, say China today, I was just looking at one tweet by a Chinese embassy which said that, be it a trade war or a tariff war, China is not going to take it lying down. So, it has escalated trade wars, or right now that is that huge sense of uncertainty. That is the second big reason.
Yeah, and with these reciprocal tariffs and Trump being so unpredictable, investors are uncertain how things will play out as far as trade is concerned.
Absolutely. And markets hate uncertainty. If there is something which the markets at this point of need is certainty about global order, certainty about, say, how domestic economy would grow, certainty about demand in the Indian markets, in the Indian economy. So those are things which are right now not so visible.
And Vaidi, what is the third reason? We talked about corporate turnovers, we talked about Trump. What is the third reason that the stock market has seen a slump?
Third reason, I think, it's India's own domestic issues. I think, are we pressing all the buttons for reforms? Is India up for a 6% plus growth? Or is it preparing itself for an 8% plus growth? Because, right now, the trend seems to be from, when you're talking to people or looking at estimates, we seem to be prepared for a 6% to 7% kind of growth rate. So is it a high enough growth rate for an economy of our size with the number of poor people that we have?
And earlier you mentioned how a lot of people over the past few years have started investing in the stock market. They have started investing in mutual funds. Do we have a sense of how many people are being affected by this slump right now?
See, I think, there are proxies to what we can arrive at. I may not have exact numbers of, say how many people are investing in the stock markets, but there are numbers. Say, for instance, there are numbers of from where does the money into the stock markets come from. Say, for instance, most of the people today invest in the stock markets through mutual funds. people are not investing directly in the equities. People who invested in, these esoteric instruments called derivatives. It is not esoteric, but it is people who do not understand what they are getting into by trading in futures and options. They must have burned their fingers quite a bit, and that they have, we have solid data which SEBI has come out with saying that all of them have burned fingers. But those who invest through mutual funds, 10 years back, 2014, we did carry a report in our newspaper by Sandeep Singh, which said that, 10 years back in 2014, 2 rupees out of 100 rupees was coming into the mutual funds from cities beyond the top 110 cities. So these top 110 cities accounted for almost 98% of all inflows into mutual funds. Roughly at that point of time in 2010, the total inflows into the mutual funds was about 10 lakh crore.
Which is what one would expect.
But lo and behold, 14 to 2024, the money that comes from cities beyond these 110 cities, so 110 cities itself is a large number, right? So, beyond these cities, about 20 rupees out of 100 rupees comes from these cities. So you see how the culture has spread of investing in the stock markets through the mutual fund route, right? And even the number of investors registered in the National Stock Exchange, those who are trading in equity markets, has gone up very sharply, has gone up by almost 5 times in the last 5 years itself. That's a large number. So I think if you look at the proxies, the equity culture has spread very fast and wide. And in states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Assam, where the percentage growth in the number of investors is 1,000%, 500%, 450%, those are the growth rates in the number of investors that we are seeing in these states. These are not traditionally states which you would think are very market savvy. Immediately what comes to our mind when we say market savvy people is probably Maharashtra and Gujarat. But now the equity culture, like equity has become, as some of the commentators have said in our newspaper, it has become a mass product. And it hurts a large number of people, especially when in the last 5 years they haven't seen any salary hikes. Wage hikes in India have disappeared. That is a harsh reality of corporate sector, that their bottom lines have grown at the cost of their employees. Their employees' salaries haven't risen.
And earlier you were talking about how if you're someone who started investing just last year, almost all your mutual funds would be down right now. What do market experts say people should keep in mind at the moment?
Yeah, so I think, 2 things. That one, public memory is very short. Very interesting. Just 3 years back, we have seen such a dramatic slump, or a bigger slump, right? Between October 21 and June 22, we've seen the markets slump by 18%, which is much more than this. We don't remember the bigger falls that have happened in the past, and markets have bounced back. The thing is that investors should know that in equity markets or in mutual funds, it is not a one-day affair.
It's a long-term game.
It's completely a long-term. So 3 to 5 years is also a very reasonable expectation of a time frame when you look at it for expecting good returns from the markets. And markets have never really, hurt you in that time frame. So people have to be patient, and the time frame is 2 to 3 years. Don't, lose sleep over it.
And whether if we were to talk about what the government can do, it can do very little about what Trump is going to do. And as far as the corporate sector is concerned, they have tried the corporate tax cut. And now they've gone to the consumer side of things and have given a tax relief. But when it comes to policy implementation, talk about the things that the government can do to sort of better this situation.
I think the government should not worry too much about the markets, but the government can give confidence in terms of the stability of its own policies. Not doing anything which is adding to the uncertainty, responding to the external environment by, say, messaging which is progressive, which is kind of taking in account the uncertainties around the world and reacting to it in a balanced measure. I think that itself will be a great movement forward.
So a government message that actually gives confidence to the investors.
Absolutely. I think a government message that could give confidence to the investors would be that, say, as simple as this, that, I have given, tax cuts in this budget. The tax cut kick in from April 1. The government expects people to kind of what is good for them. And I think there is no direction which the government can give. But then the government can say that, now it also expects corporates to kind of take advantage that of more money in the hands of the consumers. Can corporates think about, investing more? And then government itself actually, in this budget, they have continued with their whole idea of capital investment. They are putting in a lot more money. So I think the government can just stay the course because, at times when there is a storm, it's just better to duck the storm than do anything dramatic.
And next we revisit the Bofors scandal. Back in 1987, a Swedish radio channel made allegations that rocked the then Rajiv Gandhi-led government. The allegations were regarding an arms deal that India had signed with the Swedish arms manufacturer AB Bofors for the supply of 400 howitzer guns for the army. The deal was worth 1,437 crore rupees, which the radio channel said had been signed after the company had bribed top Indian politicians and defense personnel.
So, see, we are talking about something that almost 4 decades.
That's the Indian Express's investigative journalist, Ritu Sarin.
86 the contract was signed and 87 was the first splash about a possible kickback scandal. And the story is back again today. The story was back since the last few weeks because a major book has just been published and written by Chitra Subramaniam, a journalist who's based in Switzerland and who worked on the story for a decade. So Bofors never really goes away.
Chitra Subramaniam was the one who extensively reported on the story in India. Her exposés were first published in The Hindu and then subsequently in the Indian Express and The Statesman. Now, when Ritu says that Bofors never really goes away, it's not just because of Subramaniam's recently published book Bofors Gate, but also because just this week, we came to know about another development regarding this case. But before we get to that and the details of this latest book, she tells us what happened in the parliament when the story first broke out.
So it rocked parliament for days and days on end. And then a joint parliamentary committee was formed. They submitted their report. Subsequently, even the CAG, the Comptroller and Auditor General, had done an inquiry. And as it turned out, the Congress in 89 had a terrible defeat electorally. So, virtually they lost elections because of the Bofors scandal.
And could you talk about who were the main accused in the case?
So, see, the whole thing actually is that the contract, when the Swedes and the Indian government signed it, said that no commissions should be paid to Indians. So the whole allegation was that commissions were paid to a bunch of people. And that is why Bofors is such a alphabet soup, because the names through investigations done in India and abroad, Chitra and others, we got to know names of accounts which were linked to groups of people, So there was the Hinduja brothers. And the last closure of the case, the one I'm talking about in 2005, was against the Hinduja brothers. And that is still pending in the Supreme Court. But anyways, so Hinduja brothers, then there was Vin Chadda, and there was Ottavio Quattrocchi, who was an Italian businessman who had a company called Snam Proghetti and was always known to be very close to the Gandhis. So each of these strains of the investigation led to a lot of politics, led to a lot of developments in court. And as far as Quattrocchi is concerned, his money was frozen briefly and then it was defrozen. The money disappeared. And as it turns out, all the dramatis personae, all the key players, none of these players are there, of course, except for the Hinduja brothers. Two of the Hinduja brothers are alive, and the others, including the politicians, Martin Ardbro, who headed the Bofors company, so Rajiv Gandhi, Martin Ardbro, Vin Chadha, Quattrocchi, they've all passed on.
Right, and the stuff that is pending in the Supreme Court is very peripheral to the case. But what's important is that, despite this being such a big scandal, almost every key person was exonerated by the courts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Exonerated in 2005 by the Delhi High Court. A lot of politics happened over filing of that review. That's very interesting. So the CBI wants to file a review, but if the government changes, then the Attorney General of that time does not give permission, etc., etc. So we have the entire secret file notings.
And Ritu, on what basis were these people exonerated?
See, it was actually on technical grounds. So that photocopies can't be produced in court, things like that. But lack of evidence. Basically lack of clinching evidence. And of course, it was the Congress rule to reopen. The investigating agency is supposed to go in review. If you lose in the trial court, you're supposed to go to the High Court and then the Supreme Court, and eventually final decisions are made in the Supreme Court. But the CBI was not allowed to. So that's how political the case has been. Then, when this government comes in 2014, I think it was 2017 or 18 that they filed a review in the 2005 matter. And the court says you're 13 years too late. It's, time barred, and they're not allowed to file a review.
And we earlier talked about Chitra Subramaniam and the book that she has written about this case. And in that book, she says that there are still between 500 to 1,000 pages of secret Swiss documents which were sent to India in 1997 and which she says still remain unopened. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So see, that book is yet to be launched. So there's a book release, I think, later in the month. And Chitra will be coming to India for it. It's a very major book. And also in the book is, the personal trauma that she faced and the difficulties that she faced, the harassment that she faced. And also from her point of view, of course, the fact that the Indian government changed hands because of the Bofors scandal. And Swiss amended its laws also. So the Indian government had formally asked Switzerland for case records because all these accounts into which the kickbacks had allegedly gone, 64 crores, were Swiss bank accounts. So the box, or one box or two box, was finally given to India in 97. And it was a sort of public display of handing over this information to India. This happened in Bern, and I think the Indian ambassador was present there. Chitra also was there. And very interestingly, there's a picture in the book that she's standing next to the box before it comes to India.
And does this claim that these boxes still remain unopened, does this run counter to what the CBI says?
So since this comes up so often, that unopened boxes, I thought I must check with CBI people who were investigating the case. In the CBI also, as it turns out, because this case was there in the agency for so long, the CBI registered its FIR in 1990. And so many directors have changed, in that period from then to now. And so many are no more. So I did speak to two investigators who are known to have done the case and handled the case for a long time, who said that, but we opened the box and opened it in court. And that was formed the basis of our charge sheet. So that was interesting.
And you mentioned how this case led to Sweden changing its laws. So was it a big deal there as well?
Yes, it was a very, very big deal in Sweden. It rocked Sweden also because there were allegations of, one of the largest defense firms. And Martin Ardbro, if I'm not mistaken, Ardbro was named in the charge sheet. And it was a big deal.
And what's really interesting is that just earlier this week, we came to know about another development in this case. We found out that the CBI has made a judicial request to the United States after sending a letter rogatory requesting information from a private investigator, Michael Hirschman. Can you tell us who Hirschman is and how he ties in with this case?
So it's very interesting because if you do some referencing, you'll figure out that the same year that the Bofors scam began in 1987 via the Swedish radio is the year where we first hear about Michael Hirschman. So that was the time when we had the head of enforcement, a gentleman called Mr. Bhurelal, who is still working and in fact is a member of the Supreme Court Monitoring Committee. So Bhurelal is very much there. So he was the head of the enforcement. And he went ahead and hired Fairfax, a company called Fairfax, an American detective agency, which was linked or where Hirschman was working. And then there was a great controversy about whether VP Singh had authorized hiring of Fairfax, against the Congress, that they had a lot of deep knowledge about the wheeling dealings of the Congress. So that's the first time we hear of them. Then now, in about 2017 or something, there was a conference of detectives in Delhi and Mr. Hirschman visits New Delhi and gives lots of interviews, There he speaks about how he has a lot of information about Bofors and how the Gandhis had scuttled the probe and things like that, in interviews. And this I'm now talking about 2017, 2018 when the government has changed. And this government then for the first time says that we want to ask him to give us information, which he has been claiming and, shouting from the rooftops about. And they start initiating moves to send requests for information to the US government, formally, but not via LR. And apparently with not much success. So now the thing is to move it bilaterally and to do a LR, which has gone a few days ago.
And in the end, we talk about the controversy surrounding Rohit Sharma and the Congress party. Earlier this week, the Congress national spokesperson Shama Mohammed found herself in the middle of a political row after she called the Indian cricket captain Rohit Sharma fat for a spokesperson in a social media post. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Asad Rehman, he told us more about it.
The match between India and New Zealand was going on, and in between that match or after that match, she made this comment. Like, in her defense also, she was saying that she was watching the cricket game and then she felt that Rohit Sharma is too fat for a sportsperson, and these are her words. And then it became a political slugfest. As in, like, the Congress completely went on the back foot and they denied that the party has anything to do with those remarks. And the party even asked her to delete the post on social media. And then reactions started coming from different quarters. The sports minister reacted, the BCCI reacted, several BJP leaders reacted, saying that it was wrong, it was demoralizing for the cricket team, and that it was in the middle of an international tournament, that the Indian cricket team is being demoralized by the Congress. The BJP even went as far as saying that the Congress doesn't like self-confident India or an India which is doing well, and that is why these such comments keep coming from the party.
Now, all this happened during the ongoing Champions Trophy. And Asad says that after the party faced backlash, Shama Mohammed ended up deleting her post.
She said that, it was not supposed to be demoralizing and that it was just an observation on the cricket match, and that it was allowed to, as per her freedom of expression rights, and that she had just made a comment about the sport and that it should not be blown out of proportion. But by then, the damage had already been done because the Congress didn't back her. They asked her to withdraw the comment. And then the party also said that the party doesn't believe in what she has said. So she was left in a way isolated. But she stuck to her guns. Even though she deleted the post, she still stuck to it, saying that, there was nothing wrong in what she had said and that it was her objective opinion on an athlete, on a cricket superstar, and that she compared the previous captains of the Indian cricket team like MS Dhoni, Rahul Dravid, and she said that they were not as fat, was the word that she used.
Now, this is not the first time the Congress party has been at the center of controversy due to its leaders' comments.
Yeah, see, the Congress has had this issue of late, and if you look at the last few months only, Mr. Sam Pitroda has made several comments which have landed the party in trouble, where the communication in charge for the party, Mr. Jairam Ramesh, has to issue a clarification saying that this is not the party line and this is his personal views. So Sam Pitroda is someone who's done something like this, and he's spoken on very sensitive issues also. Like, the most recent of his comments which landed the party in trouble was his comments on China, where he went completely against the party line, saying that the rivalry and the fight with China is blown out of proportion because the US has a certain way of describing an enemy, and that the Chinese were not as threatful as they're made to be. Now, this was a way more embarrassing comment because Pitroda is saying something which is going completely against the party line. The party has been targeting the BJP-led central government over Chinese occupation. That's their allegation, that there are parts of India where China has occupied land. And that, again, the party was left embarrassed. They had to issue a clarification. And Pitroda has been doing this for the last few years, if you look at his history. This is not the first time. In the middle of Lok Sabha elections, he spoke about the inheritance tax, which became a huge part of the BJP's narrative, that the Prime Minister started talking about that if the Congress comes to power, they are going to take away your children's wealth and that what you're going to leave for them. Again, the party had to distance itself from the comments, say that, we don't believe in what Mr. Pitroda is saying.
Similarly, Shashi Tharoor's recent comments praising the LDF had again landed the Congress in trouble, and the party had to issue a clarification.
The Congress has had some issues in terms of, I think, discipline within the party. Because some of these leaders go against the party line and then they say something and which they believe in, which then lands the party in some degree of, trouble, where the central party leadership has to, do damage control and manage things in a way that it doesn't affect the overall perception of the party as anti-India or anti-national. Like, same thing with like the Shama Mohammed cricket thing. The BJP and the opposition factions to the Congress, they started giving it an anti-India angle that, they're against the Indian and self-confident India. So that is one of the reasons that the party had to, withdraw those comments. And this is in the middle of an ICC international cricket tournament. And as we know, cricket is a very sensitive subject where everyone wants the cricket team to win and do well. So the Congress again had realized that, and that's one of the reasons that they asked Shama Mohammed to withdraw those comments and delete the post on social media.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.